Lovely. So, let's welcome Mr. Simon Fern. Good morning.
Good morning, Ian. Good to see you again.
Lovely. So, let's talk about the first part of our interview is all about you. So, can you tell me more about how did you transition from your old career into IELTS, and also please tell us about your traveling journey.
Sure. So I was made redundant from a large energy company, and I used the payout from that to launch a business in IT, which I'd been thinking about for a while, specializing in accessories, recycled and compatible ink cartridges, and became pretty successful. And with the financial freedom that provided, I was able to pursue my dream of traveling the world. And after a few years of that, I realized I wanted to sustain this lifestyle, but I needed to have a stable income. Some of my friends who were already working overseas as ESL teachers thought that that particular career would be a great choice for myself. So I decided to take the leap, and I did a certification course, and I began teaching at English language school, and quickly transitioned into IELTS coaching after that. And now, yeah, over a decade later, I still continue to help students achieve their goals.
So can you share to us like you're from the UK, but I never asked you where exactly, like London?
Manchester, the
Manchester.
third largest city in England, yeah.
So how did it start? Like from Manchester, what place did you travel? Most likely Europe. Like, can you share us your travel experience?
Sure, I had my first holiday overseas at the age of 16, which I guess was my first trip away from home as independent holiday with a friend of mine. And it just opened my eyes. The climate, the sunshine, the UK is not renowned for great weather. And just meeting people from different walks of life, I thought this is an amazing experience. And I just knew from that point onward I wanted to spend a large part of my life traveling or visiting.
And what is or where was your recent travel?
Recently, I've been spending most of my time in Asia. I've been around, apart from the Philippines, where I live now, I've also been in Thailand, Australia for 1 year. I've traveled around Singapore and Hong Kong. So yeah, Asia's been the recent one.
So let's move back into IELTS. So can you tell me like what is the most rewarding thing about helping students succeed in IELTS?
When you get a message or an email from a student and they tell me that they've took the test and they managed to get and achieve the band score they were hoping for, I can I can read their excitement and the gratitude. It's an amazing feeling. Helping students reach their target score can be truly life-changing and opens many new doors of opportunities, not just with education, but for careers and immigration. And knowing that I played a part in their success is what I find most meaningful and rewarding.
Is there someone that you could say like a story worth telling, like an inspiration for everyone?
Yeah, there's a couple I could think of. One in particular comes to mind. There was a Filipino student nurse, and she had this goal of working, or this dream of working in the USA.
Mhm.
She'd been attending a local IELTS training center
Mhm.
where I worked at the time, and she'd been going for quite some time. And fortunately, she couldn't quite get to that band 7 for speaking. She was able to do it for writing, reading, and listening, sometimes 7.5 or 8, but for the speaking component, that was the most difficult for her. She was getting band 6 or 6.5. And she was about to give up, and I felt like I'd failed her. So I encouraged her to not give up, persist. Let's do a bit more intensive one-on-one. And I'm pleased to say that she's now living and working in America.
That's nice. And do you still have like communication with her?
From time to time, yeah, like, just like Christmas and New Year kind of messages. But yeah, it's nice to still keep in touch.
It's kind of a bit interesting that in our industry, it's just a regular Monday or a Tuesday, but for them, it's a life-changing situation where probably back in our previous institution, we have some students that married their classmate. Eventually, they establish a family. We could see that they become different. They started to living in Australia, the UK, because you and other teacher managed to deliver their potential and succeed in IELTS. So if we're gonna go now to a much more technicality about IELTS, Simon, can you tell me like what are the struggles that most students are like band 6 to band 7 when it comes to speaking and writing? Based on your experience, what are the most common mistake they make and what is your suggestion on how they can improve?
Yeah, band 6 to band 7, this seems to be an area which is problematic for the majority of students. Some advice is to prioritize the weakest areas first. So instead of practicing everything equally, students should identify their weakest skills, whether it's writing, speaking, listening, or reading, and then focus on those particular areas first. When we prioritize, we're cutting out a lot of wasted time, and practice full length tests also under time conditions. As you know, the writing task is in two sections, for example, 20 minutes for task one, 40 minutes for task two. And then also for the reading,
Mhm.
time yourself 60 minutes like you're under exam conditions. So you get used to the time frame involved. This is one area that can improve.
So just to add a follow-up question on that, based on your observation, what are the common misconception test taker often have with the IELTS exam? Because for me, I'm an advocate of eradicating memorizing answer. Most of my students, especially in China, they tend to memorize answers like they're just talking about it's like I know the story already before they finish. So how do you deal with that, or what's your advice on those kind of students?
Yeah, the examiners are trained to spot for that. So it's important that a natural speech occurs when they're taking the speaking test, particularly. Some students think it's important to have a British or American accent, which is not the case. As long as your pronunciation is clear and easy to understand, that is the main thing.
Mhm.
Some students believe using big words will get them a higher score, but sometimes if they're using that word grammatically incorrect, it can cause them to lose points. So they need to know the accurate meaning and practice using more complex vocabulary.
Is there a particular like do you have a personal favorite, like a common memorize or common mistakes vocabulary that they often spew?
So it depends on the student's nationality, I guess. I've noticed that I'm not generalizing, but like you mentioned earlier, the Chinese students, I think in particular for Turkish students, they quite often use two in the wrong setting. They'll mean it as in that they're having like so much fun, but they use it in the wrong context where it sounds negative, like there were too many roller coasters at the theme park. rather than say, there were so many roller coasters. So quite often I notice this comes up a lot with my Turkish students. Again, with the Japanese students, with pronunciation, they struggle with L and R sounds. So we need to really practice that particular vocabulary with tongue twisters, etc.
I remember one of the challenges in IELTS is part two, wherein you have to speak for 2 minutes. Some of my student will tell me they cannot really generate a lot of answers, and to some degree, like it's hard for someone to talk for 2 minutes. What's your advice with that?
Practice speaking English daily. Now, they may not have another English speaking companion to do this with, so I just recommend record yourself. But even if it's just for 10 or 15 minutes, get used to speaking at length. And then if you can do 5 or 10 minutes, when it comes to part two, where the 2 minutes is the cutoff, they shouldn't have a problem, or it should certainly help them that way. But it's consistency and daily practice.
So let's talk about preparation. In your personal opinion or in your professional opinion, can a student actually improve within just weeks? Like how many months or how many weeks should a student needs to study to get like a point 0.5?
On average, it takes, I would say, 3 to 6 months. So it's a lot longer than some students realize. Again, it all depends on the particular student. Some students can pick up languages quicker. Some students have more time to devote to it. So as a broad approximation, I would say 3 to 6 months, you could increase 0.5 and score.
So one of the challenges that I've also noticed is listening, especially when it comes to different accent. As far as I remember, when someone's taking the Cambridge IELTS exam, there's a mixture of Australian, British, different regional accent in the UK, even Americans. And how can someone without prior experience with those accents could actually learn those, besides, of course, listening to a lot of podcasts, listening to a lot of English movies and others? Like, what can we also, like, what other ways uh, could we actually learn understanding different accents?
So with the listening test, it's unlike the reading where you can go back and check answers. You only get one chance from the audio. So to include the things that you said, of course, listening to TV shows and films with different accents, to practice listening for different accents, Scottish, British, Australian, and others. Learn that the IELTS listening test will often have distractors. So this means they will try to give you some misleading information beforehand. If a student is too quick to write down what they think is the correct answer, but then they get tricked because of a change in information that will come a few seconds later. So this is one of the big areas students have a problem with on the listening test. So try to look at two questions at the same time. The question that you think you're on, and then the next one, just in case the audio has passed that one and you've missed it, at least you don't lose that whole section. Another mistake can be for spelling and accuracy. Sometimes they may lose points due to incorrect use of grammar when they're writing in the word. You need to change it to fit the sentence grammatically correct, or even a simple spelling mistake, it would be
Mhm.
marked incorrect.
I would just like to verify because one of the examiners that I've spoken to before, it's like you can use American or the correct one because they say, right, there's only two types of English, the correct one and the wrong one. Let's say the word color, if you have to spell it out. If the speaker is British and you write in American, would that considered be wrong?
It's best to check on the the website of the British Council, the official IELTS.org website, because policy can change. So as of now, I believe it's either or. You can choose to write the answer with the British spelling or the American spelling, and either would be correct. But it's better to keep, if you decide to do American spelling, for example, it's better to keep the whole paper with the American spelling.
Speaking of that, I remember when I was still studying, or I'm still studying, but during my early years, it's like when I've heard British people saying vitamins, it's like I never heard them saying like vitamins, like vitamins, privacies, like aluminium. Did I like in America we say aluminum, but it's like, and I've watched Sherlock, and the way they say the words are totally different. So when they do the IELTS exam, when they say the word privacy, it's like even someone who knows the word privacy, sometimes it doesn't really capture. It's like the way the accent, or sometimes Australian accent. But as far as I know, they make sure that the accent is not like a heavy regional accent, like I'm sorry, like a Scottish or like an Irish accent. I've never heard that. Or like an Australian thick accent.
Yeah, even some of the Scottish accents I find hard to understand. So yeah, it's okay to have an accent as long as we can be understood.
Yeah, have you watched The Tourist?
The what? Sorry,
Tourist.
the
Uh,
tour.
no,
Is that a movie?
no, sorry. The Foreigner, Jackie Chan and the guy who played James Bond. Turns I didn't realize he was Northern Irish. He
No,
was.
I haven't watched that one.
It's like I forgot who's that James Bond. He was James Bond before Daniel Craig, and then he was. I didn't know he's like British. When he spoke in Northern Irish, it's like that's a different accent. It's like different. Then you have the Scottish. Like they have a very different accent. Like it's really hard. But again, like what you said, right? It's like you need to learn that by heart.
Yeah,
So
even various parts of Scotland, from Glaswegian to Edinburgh. Edinburgh for me is relatively easy to understand, but the next city across, Glasgow, we call them Glaswegian. Yeah, that's a difficult one.
thank you. So let's talk about let's go back about you now. So outside teaching, of course, outside traveling, can you tell me like what are your passions? What are the things that you are focusing outside work?
I love live events, whether it be theatre, concerts, or festivals, or just a walk in the nature. But I do have a passion for live events, for sure.
Like you're in the Philippines, what was the recent live events like you've been to?
Right, I've been to the Philippine Arena, which is, I think it's the largest indoor seated arena in the world, 55,000 seat
Mhm.
capacity. And I was fortunate enough to see Coldplay last year,
Yeah.
and that was an amazing experience. For theatre, I have seen The Sound of Music, also at a theatre in Manila, and a couple of years ago in London at the Piccadilly Theatre, saw a contemporary version of Moulin Rouge.
Ooh.
Yeah, this is one of my passions, live
You
events.
never tried to play in the like in the theater?
No, no, I've never played in theatre.
Okay,
So,
so since this is part of, or since the name of this podcast is tea, and of course, we like to drink tea. Can you share to me like what's your favorite uh, tea variant?
so I do like English tea. I think it's known as breakfast tea around here. So that would be my go-to cup of tea with a digestive biscuit during the day. But herbal tea in the evening, no caffeine for me.
Mhm.
Otherwise, I'll not sleep.
A friend of mine, or a dear friend of mine, usually gets his breakfast tea in Marks and Spencer. So in the Philippines, like, or personally, where you're at right now, where do you get your tea?
Well, actually, there are Marks and Spencer branches here, so occasionally I do get my tea from Marks and Spencer's, but quite often I have many friends or family members visiting, and they'll bring me a big bag of PG tips from England, and that will last me a long time.
And then, correct me if I'm wrong. Can you tell me more about like what's a builder's tea? Is it the right term?
Builder's tea, yeah, it's like a strong British tea. It's uh, basically strong and sweet. So usually a big dollop of milk and 2 or 3 heap spoons of sugar. Of course, if you're a builder, you need a lot of energy to
Yeah,
sustain.
it's like that's the way they get their energy, right?
Yeah, milky and sweet
Mhm.
and strong. Yeah.
So, again, going back to you now, any any plans to travel in the near future and where?
So on my bucket list, I've got Japan and Taiwan, possibly mainland China as well.
Mhm.
So I'm looking at that maybe for later this year or next year, my future travel plans.
Okay, so two more. So, can you tell me your favorite English word or a idiomatic expression or a slang?
My favorite English word is flabbergasted.
Like,
I like the sound of it. It sounds comical, it sounds funny to hear. It's much more interesting than surprised. I was flabbergasted. Yeah, for expression, on the tip of my tongue. I quite often teach this one to my students. They can use it as a filler on the speaking IELTS test. Give them time to think. Make a full sentence. Once you've memorized it, I forgot the word in English. It's on the tip of my tongue. And now they can use that as a filler while they ask. Plus, they're going to get a few extra points because they've just used an idiom.
yeah, and not really a common one, right?
Correct.
And lastly, we're not going to talk about academic English book, but like, what's your favorite book that you would recommend people to read and why?
I like but when you say not academic book, you mean
Like
not
not ESL book, not IELTS academic for like a book that you want to people to read.
oh right. I I've I'm big into autobiographies, so I've recently read a book by Anthony Kiedis, lead singer of Red Hot Chili Peppers, called Scar Tissue. I thought that was a great book, and I'm currently reading I Am Ozzy, Ozzy Osbourne from Black Sabbath. I'm currently enjoying that. I'm about halfway through that particular book. So yeah, if you like autobiographies, that's the way to go.
For me, the only autobiography, it sounds cliche, but Steve Jobs by Walter Isaacson. It's kind of a bit interesting. The way they ended, because he died when it was published. So it was the way they wrapped up the idea. It was nice. It was touching. And lastly, I'll give you the floor. Can you tell the listeners how could they contact you if they want to book you? How do they do it? How do they contact you?
Yeah, I think you're going to put the details down below in the box.
Yes.
But yeah, by email, simonpaulfern@email.com. Or for Chinese students, I also have WeChat, Teacher Simon 2018. That's my handle on WeChat. That's probably the best method for now.
Okay. So, and do you do like one-on-one group class or like what subject do you often like? Do you have courses?
Most of my students are private and I tailor it on an individual basis. So after the first lesson, we'll come up with a plan together. So not all my students are IELTS students. I also have some business English students who are successful businessmen and they want to improve their career or just sustain their level of English. So it depending on the student, we can certainly do a tailor-made lesson plan.
Lovely. So, Simon, thank you so much. It's nice to see you. It's been a while. We never really say goodbye when I left. Uh, but anyways, thank you so much. And
You're welcome.
uh,
I've enjoyed it.
to all our audience, thank you so much. And this is our second episode of Teaching English at Papa. Thank you so much, guys. Simon, thank you so much. Bye
You're
bye.
welcome. Bye.